Hello, everybody, and welcome. Give it a couple more seconds for everybody to make it in from the lobby. But good morning and welcome to talk about SNARF at FCON 2025. Awesome. Looks like everybody's here. So again, thanks for joining us on today's talk. It's called SNARF's Kitchen Recipes for Success. But before we get into the meat of today's conversation, I wanted to introduce our wonderful sponsor today from Airlock Digital, Jason Davis. Thanks, Jason.
Good morning, Jason Davis, Airlock Digital. We're exclusively a application control and allow listing solution. All right, application and control allow listing it's always had three big problems. Right, first, implementation was hard. You needed deep technical expertise just to get it running. Second, the operational cost was huge. Teams of people were constantly babysitting consoles as new apps, updates, and changes rolled out. And third, Patch Tuesday made Wednesday a nightmare. Right, users were frustrated, IT scrambling to recover. Here's a quick video that highlights how we've simplified application control and allow listing and really made it easy to install, scalable, and easy to manage.
Every process on a computer, trusted or malicious, must execute to take action. The key to security is deciding what runs and what doesn't. On one side, trusted applications run smoothly, secure, verified, and approved. And on the other side, malware, ransomware, and hidden threats attempt to execute. The best defense? Preventing threats from running in the first place. Airlock Digital puts organizations in control, allowing only trusted applications whilst blocking all unknown threats before they execute. Traditional application control solutions fail, breaking business processes, frustrating users, and preventing scalability. Airlock Digital removes these roadblocks, delivering lightweight, scalable security without disrupting operations. Unlike most security tools that are focused on detection, Airlock Digital prioritizes prevention, blocking untrusted applications before they execute. This can be done across Windows, Linux, and Mac, including legacy systems like Windows XP and Server 2003, in environments of any size. Airlock Digital deploys seamlessly via the CrowdStrike Falcon agent, or other deployment tools such as Intune. Upon deployment, the agent immediately enters learning mode and categorizes files into 4 different categories. Known, which is verified and trusted software. Unknown, which are homegrown or unclassified applications. Suspicious, which are potentially risky files that are flagged by threat intelligence. Or malicious, dangerous files that require immediate action. Unlike traditional solutions with automatic vendor approvals, Airlock lets you define trust, because you know what's best for your organization. Administrators can create policy groups by location, user type, or business function, ensuring flexibility and control. Airlock also offers multiple trust methods via publisher or certificate, hash, path, and process. With metadata filtering, policies can also be customized even further to align with your business needs. Airlock Digital also strengthens endpoint security with built-in features such as Trusted Installer. Trusted Installer automatically trusts software deployments from deployment utilities such as SCCM, Intune, and Jamf, ensuring seamless software rollouts without manual approvals. Browser extension control, which blocks unauthorized extensions, stopping malware, spyware, and phishing-based credential theft. Blocklisting, which is a deny-always security approach that prevents execution of known threats and stops living off the land attacks by blocking the misuse of system tools such as PowerShell. And enforcement, which seamlessly locks down execution, enabling only trusted applications to run while blocking all unknown and unauthorized files. Once enforced, management takes less than 30 minutes a day on average, even in the largest environments. Airlock Digital's proactive prevention seamlessly integrates with existing EDR and SIEM solutions, creating a truly defense-in-depth approach. By blocking untrusted files before they execute, Airlock reduces alert fatigue without compromising visibility. This ensures security teams get fewer but more actionable alerts. With the best application control protecting your environment, organizations achieve unmatched security, stopping threats before they ever have a chance to execute.
So appreciate it if you guys can stop by the vendor in the vendor expo. It's right after this, right? Stop by our booth. We're up for conversation, and we also have a resource button where you can book a demo directly. So back over to you, John.
Thanks, Jason. Most appreciated. There we are. All right, I'm back. All right, everybody, let's into our talk today. Welcome to today's talk called SNARF's Kitchen Recipes for Success. Trying to get intros out of the way. My name is John Owen. I am currently the Director of Security and Data Analytics at Fulcrum Technology Solutions. I generally like all things data, cyber, but also have affinities for things like golf, 3D printing, AI, blah, 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 and things like DIY electronics. Also with me today is Devlin Crooks.
Hey guys, senior consultant in Fulcrum as well. I'm all into automation, AI, nerding out, automating, nerding out, and biking.
Awesome, I'm glad to have you. So let's start with a situation that may sound familiar to you. You get an alert at 3 a.m. Your SIM just alerted you that there's some suspicious activity. But what do you do next? First, you have to analyze this as a real threat. What's the impact of the threat? Then you got to worry about containment and eradication. What are the processes here? How do we stop it? What's our plan? Then obviously, if we get past containment and eradication, how do we move into recovery and learn lessons for the next time that this comes around? How do we restore the operations? Have we seen this before? Can we adapt? Can we do this better, faster, or stronger? But all the answers to all these questions are scattered across internal documents based in wikis, SharePoints, emails, or even worse, people's heads. Today we're going to go over, kind of our solution for this issue. We'll kind of talk about the crisis of knowledge, what our vision is behind the solution, the core components for this framework, all the interconnections, and how you can actually make this meaningful if you were to implement this or portions of it into your day-to-day. And then obviously measuring success, make sure that we're having a meaningful positive impact on security operations and risk. When we were kind of putting together the initial basis for this, kind of a number popped up multiple times. It's number 83. This was almost no coincidence. It appears in two critical spots. First, 83% of security teams report experiencing alert fatigue. They're overwhelmed by volume of notifications, many of which lack proper context or clear response guidance. Also, the average number of security tools within an enterprise organization is 83 separate products, each generating its own logs. They have their own dashboards, their own tooling. This is not just a coincidence, as I mentioned. This is just a symptom of our fragmented approach typically to security. More tools creating more alerts without connected knowledge that leads directly to that 83% fatigue rate. What we're seeing is it's typically not a lack of security tools or lack of information. It's the lack of interconnectivity and enrichment and turning this information into knowledge, which presents today our security knowledge crisis, right? The reality of today is that 59% of security teams receive more than 500 alerts per day. If you do the quick math on that, one person is teaming through alerts faster than probably is responsible. Knowledge continues to be siloed and split across teams and platforms. Cross-team collaboration is sometimes at a minimum. And as soon as we create documentation, it immediately, kind of dies on the vine. This lacks critical context that staff needs during responses in very critical time-sensitive times. So here we have between threat intelligence teams writing and responding to detections, and those they were responsible for either testing or responding automatically or configuring the source systems to respond automatically to these different threats and detections are typically disconnected, or at least they have their own mandates. So we kind of put together our vision for connecting the security knowledge into a platform and solution that we call SNARF, the Security Knowledge Automation and Response Framework. Here we have our little SNARF and our nice, healthy old man Jackie here to help us along our path. So introducing SNARF, what is it? This is a framework built with some very core tenets of cybersecurity operations and documentation at its core. So this is nothing new to most of us, but I think what is really revolutionary is how we've been able to turn this into something that is truly useful in the day-to-day and doesn't impact a lot of time for making documentation. We have 5 primary objects, starting with the core of a blueprint. This is the why. Of the lifecycle security operations. Why does this threat, risk, or interesting item exist? Is this a certain threat actor we'll worry about, or a vulnerability, or some CISA directive that we've received, in our email notifications? Obviously, we focus then on detections, things that we can actually identify signals, items of interest, what really supports the minutia of the things that we're looking for based on our blueprints. Then those detections are supported by the kind of obvious here. How do you respond to it, either manually or automatically? And then how do you test and validate that this whole entire system, the detections and your response and everything are working as expected? So that becomes now our 5 pillars of security. Starting with the foundational elements, these, we start with blueprints, right? So these, again, like I mentioned, are the comprehensive profiles of things like threats. They provide context and details, a technical element that inform everything else in our chain. They have components like threat narrative, context, impact analysis. They provide value through a shared understanding and context for response. We structured them so they each have a unique ID and are individually referenceable, and also in a standardized format that we enable with version control. So it's really, really clear and prescriptive almost on how we create these objects. From a detection standpoint, these are platform agnostic detection rules that are directly mapped to the threats that they're designed to catch. Again, this is why we're setting this foundation here to put the why with really the how. The key point of the detections here is that we track them over multiple platforms, obviously from our sort of support structure and multiple customers and multiple products that we do support. We need to have a unified approach to how we do this so that we can be able to quantify and reduce risk unilaterally across organizations. This also helps us to link context, reduce duplication, and enable consistency, not only in how we deliver services, but enable our customers and managed services to respond to those. We keep things in multiple query formats. Obviously, we center around Sigma rules as direct references, but again, the blueprints and detections form the foundational understanding of threats and how to find them. So moving forward into our ecosystem objects, we have response runbooks, SOAR playbooks, and testing runbooks. Our response runbooks provide clear guidance for analysts on how to investigate and respond to specific alerts. These include things like investigation steps, decision matrices, escalation criteria. These lead to things like reduced MTTR, consistency, and preserved knowledge within the organization. These response runbooks all map directly to detections, have also a rich format, and they are version controlled as well. Moving on to SOAR playbooks, there are automated workflows that handle repetitive tasks and the initial response steps. It's typically where we're also finding the most ease of repetition is at that layer 1. These have components and details such as what triggers the playbook, what integrations are responsible, where are the boundaries between automated and manual response. And this leads to things like faster response, more consistent response, obviously, with the automation tooling, and standardized evidence package creation. These are, again, platform agnostic, and we have defined handoffs between, again, those boundaries from manual to automated. The last thing, and sometimes unforgotten, or at least maybe not forgotten, but not invested well in, is how do you test all of this? How do we ensure that what we're setting up here actually does what we want it to do? We need both positive and negative tests, as well as the defined success criteria for each, especially of our critical use cases. These provide things like control confidence, again, ensuring that your controls are doing the things that they are built and invested to do. Reduce false positives, also improves the validation of this knowledge loop as we go through the security operations ecosystem. These have reproducible tests with expected results, again, all map back to the detection so that you're really creating this whole entire life cycle of alerts. So individually, these components each provide their own value, but when connected, they create a knowledge multiplier effect. So there's a tendency in our insecurity to think that a tool solves a problem, or this tool will solve the specific problem. But what that leads to is that we buy more tools. There will always be more problems, and so we're buying these tools to fit a specific niche problem. Sometimes we have platformization as another aspect of that, but generally each of these different systems, modules, what have you, generates alerts without context. Tool proliferation creates complexity, not clarity. So we really need to reduce the amount of tools, or at least reduce the tools that don't have knowledge in them, because we're producing more noise and signal. So the advantage of having knowledge is obviously faster triage and response times. When an analyst knows exactly why an alert fired and what threat it relates to, triage time drops dramatically. When testing validates your real-world scenarios, the confidence in your security controls increase as well. But this is the difference between information overload and actionable knowledge. Now, let's look at each component in detail. So starting off, we have every component in the back end is defined in a YAML template structure. This is whether it's a blueprint detection rule or any of our playbooks or testing runbooks. This is a consistent YAML format with a default header, so we effectively can define our objects at scale. Now, some will have opinions on YAML, but YAML was chosen deliberately for many reasons, because it is easily understandable, articulable, and is Git friendly, enabling version control and tracking changes over time, which is definitely a requirement for us here. We have a standard operating structure that ensures consistency and completeness across components, so we can even standardize objects within them. And obviously the good thing is that YAML is both machine readable and human friendly, so we're able to take code effectively and put it into some front-end platforms. So we'll kind of go through this and we'll kind of examine each component type, and we'll see how this header and the enriched details in the component specific sections actually define the individual reasoning behind each object. So Devlin, if you don't mind, you want to take us through blueprints?
Sure. So the key components to blueprints, they're the threat narrative and technical details, the historical context and evolution. An example of this would be Mimikatz or scattered spider. So just kind of like a high level object, kind of give you instructions on what exactly this is, reference materials and research, where you would find it, how you would analyze its impact analysis. And the benefits of that is you can bucketize everything underneath it. So you have shared understanding of threats. You have context for detection engineers to help develop the actual detections and the follow-up objects under that. The foundation for response planning, so that once you know what you're looking for and you have your detection logic, you know how to respond and make your runbook. And generally from there, your defensive strategy.
Nice. And as we kind of mentioned, each of these objects has our defined headers, but they also have specific category sections for, I guess, each of details that we need. So for instance, blueprints, we have the standard ID name, version control, date of creation, our author, status, and last updated date. Obviously, we track those so that we can set reminders for review. Then we have things like the description and narrative. So the description is the detailed description of the threat, so characteristics, behaviors, history. And then there's a narrative as well that has historical context, more technical details, and then it's in relation to like the current threat landscape, maybe even potential defensive strategies. We're able to link to things like internal, external references. So if we have documentation or other supporting collateral internally or hosted, maybe the source was, again, you typically CISA or other threat details as postings on the web, we can link those as well. And then we have custom tags that allow us to categorize, filter, and really organize some of the objects that we create. So for instance, here's kind of how we enable our users to do this. If we were able to get this, this email here, it leads us to a CISA directive. We can grab this whole entire article here, and we will copy that. We'll move over to SNARF. We will look at our blueprint, and we actually have, sorry about that. I'll let it play again. We actually have our Jaga assistant, which will come up here in a second, which will allow our analysts to take the I guess threat details and put it into our AI assistant that will create the blueprint object for us. Gives them a good jump start in taking a lot of technical detail and trying to boil it down into kind of this blueprint. So we'll ask Jaga here, hey, make us a blueprint based off of this threat information. And you can see it pops up here, gives us our description, our narrative. You'll even automatically extract and map to things like our categories, different products, and different use cases as well. So obviously, we're kind of enabling our own internal analysts with supportive AI so that we can move as quickly as possible. What that leads to is things like this. Devlin mentioned scattered spiders. So here we have all the different products that this directly comes, applies to. Sometimes this is not all inclusive, obviously, but it depends on where we get different sources of intelligence. We're able to categorize the types of use cases as being mainly an anomaly detection and breach detection use case. We have the description and the narrative, as we mentioned. We also have our reference, so we link out to the actual notifications itself, the relevant MITRE techniques, and their group information about Scatter Spider, and we link directly to the detections that are relevant for this. So it's a really clear picture of what do we need to be worried about, and then how do we actually, worry about it in terms of the detections. So, Devlin, you take us through detections, please?
Yep. So for the detections, the key is that it's agnostic. We're leveraging something called Sigma. And so we can convert Sigma to other languages as well. So Splunk, Elastic, Sentinel, Amazon. And then those directly map, as you saw, to the blueprints before. It's hierarchical. The implementation guidance, it'll have false positives, any sort of issues to look for, any gotchas, any lies. So if you do migrate a product or if you support multiple products, you can definitely use it. And it's got a clear narrative of what you need to detect, why, and then it also links to the other pieces of it, such as the response book and the validation run, so you can actually see, is there some kind of semantic drift? Am I detecting, am I validating against what I'm supposed to be detecting? And then you have a pipeline of just CI/CD for detection engineering. The detection structure has the same format at the top. It's prescriptive. It's consistent across all types. The actual description detail, so it has a lot of open and how you can describe it, make your own points down. What kind of behavior, how's the detection, what's it do, links to blueprints, links to response run book, secondary knowledge object. So kind of where you can start to see the pipeline begin to develop. The actual Sigma rule is where we have all the classification, the log source, any product specific query. So if we merged it before, we actually just, heard of it. And then the detection structure, we want to make sure that when we are creating the detection, we know where we're drawing from. So we'll have a data source. What does this consume to create the detection? And how do you implement it? What do we need? What are prerequisites? Do we need to configure a data model? Any parsing rules? Any add-ons and descriptions that we need to add or any other specific SIM? For the false positives, it's pretty straightforward. We don't want to include things that are just going to cause alert fatigue. And references for these are going to be similar to Blueprint, but more specific to the actual technical documentation. And then for tags, they're a bit more specific to detections. We want to know what kind of asset it's looking for. What are we trying to detect on? What's our confident impact? So if we start leveraging risk-based alerting, that'll calculate into our risk score as well. Our template message so that we know when we do trigger the detection, here is they roll up to what fields are relevant, our MITRE TAC ID so we know what's trackable, auditable. The observable fields is typically what we want to base over assets and identity on, especially if we're using risk-based alerting. And again, for products, this is what we're consuming it with. And required fields are what we need to actually compile the detection itself. So if we're looking at data and we need, host, source, test, and we're missing one, we'll know right out the gate to find that field and add it somewhere. And the security domain is similar to the asset types, so we can classify and understand this better, especially sorting, once we have thousands of detections, being able to filter on some of these can be very useful. Go ahead, John.
Yep. And then as you can see, we also have a UI front end for all of this. So we can see in our detection management, this is for use case that specifies, detecting Mimikatz with PowerShell script block logging. We have our confidence, impact, and risk score indicator percentages at the top here. And then as Devil mentioned, here's the visual elements of all of our information about the detection. It's linked blueprints, so the Ys it's connected to, references, and then we have all of our individual queries starting with Sigma and then broken out individual products, which we can do automatically via Sigma conversion. So we're maintaining those. A lot of what we're seeing is, an adoption of multiple SIMs or even, I guess, vertical specific, where we have, cloud specific or endpoint specific operations for detections. And so the adoption of multiple platforms is being much more common. And so if you're able to track use cases across platforms that track really the same thing, you're not duplicating the amount of content you have to manage and inherently the amount of risk you have to track. And obviously references over here on the right side as well. This is a screenshot of the Sigma rule conversion page. If you're not familiar with Sigma, it's pretty awesome. It's a standardized query detection language. You can almost like pseudocode-ish. Be able to see, we specify what log sources, the filters for particular field names as well. And then we can convert that to any target platform. So as our threat intel individuals, get threat intel, we can convert that into some Sigma and then really blow that out to any target platform that's required to. Okay, so from a response runbook standpoint, this bridges the gaps between, I guess, the detection and the action, right? When you get to moving. These are supposed to provide a clear step-by-step guidance for investigating and responding to specific alerts. Well-designed runbooks dramatically reduce mean time to respond, and they ensure consistent handling. So for new team members, if you're onboarding, knowledge transfer and tribal knowledge is always, a difficult thing to overcome. But having well-written, I guess, guidebooks here provide these guardrails for incident response. And for experienced analysts, they can ensure that nothing gets missed during the high stress situations. We're only human. If you're doing these day in and day out, especially at 2 a.m, your bits may not be about you, and you need to have that nice backup to make sure that you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing. These also create things like accountability by documenting decision points and escalation criteria, which is, a lot of saving grace to ensure that communication and certain key decisions are being, not only made, but tracked properly. Here's the response runbook structure. Same kind of component thing on the left-hand side for our main header. Same overview, objective. Here we have things like trigger conditions or severity matrix, prerequisites for actually being able to respond to things like, do you need certain knowledge, access to certain tools before even jumping into this. Then we have standardized procedures, as well as you can see our investigation steps, decision points, escalation criteria as well. So these are things, if you see, documented malicious or no malicious, probably want to involve level 2 at that point. We also have all supporting evidence like documentation and ticketing templates so that, again, our communication understanding is being common across all of our stakeholders. And then back to the common standard thing with references and tags there at the end. In the middle, we're actually obviously tracking and I guess defining our metrics and success criteria. So how much time do you think that this thing should take typically to respond to so that you're able to track a work effort against priorities, SLA requirements, and again, the success criteria at the top. Here's how it looks like in the UI. So our response runbook here at the top, we've got our investigation steps, summary and objectives, our prerequisites, information for required access, knowledge, tools, even including versions and specific, I guess, multi-platform. So sometimes we'll call it like EDR if we're messing with a potential, CrowdStrike or SentinelOne or something like that. We also have our response procedures documented back here in the back, where we can list out how many steps we have and how many steps that are pre-steps prior to investigation, maybe data collection or getting prepared to get access to a particular environment, decision points, escalation of criteria, and all the same details from the YAML we just went over.
I wanted to add one thing real quick, John.
Please.
So because everything is in YAML, that means that you don't need to use this UI. You can consume all of this information on any platform that can programmatically look at YAML. So if you have anything else that can read, or you do your ITSM somewhere, you can export this, and this can just be your source of truth, a centralized repository. So that's kind of a use case where you can see, hey, it's in YAML. What can I actually do with it? Do I have to use this website? This website cannot even exist for you if you don't want it to. This is just a way for you to edit and manage it, and then it's exported to another platform so you can leverage it.
Yeah. You want to take us through SOAR playbooks?
Yeah. So SOAR playbooks, if you're not familiar, security orchestration, automation, response. These are the big orchestration automation pieces behind a lot of the security response. Really what the point of this is that if we have our detections fire, do we have any automations? Do we have any enrichments? Do we want to run it through any other tools? What integrations and data sources do we need to support those automations? What kind of manual actions? Where do we want the analyst to intervene? Any documentation reporting requirements. So if we need to say, hey, this automation is running here and here and here, even though it's automated, we still want an analyst to, check it, okay it. The benefits of automation are pretty obvious, right? It's faster initial response, it's consistent, much less manual effort. So if you need to go and run and grab some artifacts from a host, the automation can grab it for you, and it can start doing half that response runbook. And then you compile all the evidence, and you can have the better integration now that the human has all the information. And here's the actual structure itself. It's way simpler than the others because if you've ever worked with SOAR, SOAR is already very complicated. So the goal of this is just the how, when, why. What do we need? We have the document header before, very standardized, the description of what it's supposed to do, where it's supposed to trigger, what integrations does it need, and then what data sources it's working on. And then references, then documentation, what are we doing with it? The reporting template for when it actually executes. The references would likely actually include a reference to the SOAR link itself so that you can actually touch it and see the definition. And maintenance, which is very critical for SOAR because oftentimes when you develop something, you don't have a reminder saying, all right, well, it's been 3 weeks. Have we touched this? Have we updated it? And then we need a reason why to actually update it. So if there are updates to it, or if there's a new threat actor, any process improvements, and then the actual classification of the SOAR itself with tags. And here's the fancy UI. Much easier to digest because it doesn't have 1,000 fields like the other ones. But as you can see from what I mentioned before, it's nice and concise. We have our description, our trigger events, what automation level is it, what tools do we need, is it Splunk, is it what EDR is it consuming? And it's very flexible, so you can actually implement any of these tags you want. Nice, open-ended, and it has a link back to detection. And it isn't one-to-one, so you can have one SOAR playbook linked to multiple detections.
Awesome, thank you. And then finally, we're looking at testing run books. So this is the, I guess, caboose. This completes the knowledge cycle. These validate that the detections actually work as expected. Again, we want positive and negative test cases so that we're testing everything when they're supposed to fire and when they're not supposed to fire. For example, when a new ransomware technique emerges, testing procedures let you verify that your detection capabilities are current before facing that threat in the wild, obviously. It also makes sure that your detections are scoped correctly and maybe prevents deduplication because you're able to validate that an existing control potentially covers a new threat. Again, back into the YAML, same heading structure. We have the high level, I guess, details and summary and objectives, but then we jump into what the environment would look like for testing, whether you need, testing infrastructure, testing tools, or testing data. And then the actual testing process itself, from the setup to the execution, and then the test cases themselves, positive, negative, or performance related. Then the validation criteria, success criteria, data validation, Troubleshooting steps, hey, maybe the log doesn't exist where you think it is, go check here. And the references and tags. The references and tags are obviously very important. We have those as well in every single object. The tags do let you be as extensible as possible. Based on the framework, that's where we've focused a lot of our enrichment in tags. But obviously, since this is a formal, YAML structure, you can add and edit fields as needed for your own requirements. And here's the fancy UI that we built. Same kind of thing. It just takes the YAML and presents it to us in a nice standardized way so that we're able to use this in security operations as opposed to getting flooded with a wall of text. We can see all of the information that we'll need to be able to perform our testing. So now we've gone over all 5 of the objects. How does this work? What does this look like, and what's the power of this new connected knowledge? So putting it together, we start with our blueprints, which document the threat in detail, which inform what we need to detect. Those detections implement monitoring for those threats across our platforms and security controls. When the detections trigger, they point to specific response runbooks. Sometimes they might even trigger a SOAR playbook directly, but sometimes via manual handoff, we will start with a response handbook that triggers a SOAR playbook. But after everything, the testing runbook validates that entire cycle actually operates as you would expect it would. This does have a meaning to dramatically improve security operations. So as your ecosystem matures, each component strengthens each other component in this kind of learning feedback loop. So you may be asking yourself, how do we implement this in practice? So moving from concept to reality, when we look at the technical architecture, we started with the content structure. These are our YAML-based templates. We layered on top of that version control by essentially hosting those in GitHub. We designed metadata storage so that we're able to easily analyze and report on certain relationships and categorizations and really manage the large scale of security knowledge that we're kind of holding on to. We also need to be able to find what we need to and introduce search and discovery. So these not only are full text search, but introducing things like vector databases to ensure that we're able to use natural language queries to identify the threats and knowledge that we need to access. This is again enhanced by things like AI assistants that I've shown you earlier as we continue to adapt Jaga to really support the creation, adaptation, and enhancement of any security use cases and knowledge that we have in the ecosystem. What we recommend is if you were to adopt this, and we'll go into some detail later, is that you start small. There's no reason to boil the ocean. There's just too much knowledge. Most of it's not very useful anyways. Begin with your top 5 critical threats, whether that's specific to your organization, your vertical, or your industry, and then try to build those complete knowledge trains out. Focus on quality over quantity. This is really just getting that momentum started. We need to connect all of our existing documentation, dig those up, put them in as references, to import your alerts, create them into detection templates, maybe convert some to Sigma so that you have a more agnostic approach to detections. You may need to convert existing wiki pages or those things that are stored within people's minds into actual documented runbooks. I promise engineers it's hopefully like a one-time thing, but we do need to actually put them down for the sake of having this connected knowledge. It will make your life easier by not getting that call in 2 a.m. because you're the only person that knows how to do that. Then you can back that up and support it with regular review cycles. We suggest quarterly, and then track everything with version control so that if there are any issues or questions, you have a reference and can roll back. We also suggest that you rotate responsibility across team members. This works in like a follow the sun model or in a hierarchical model, just so you have, multi-ownership and can, spread the wealth in terms of ownership of the platform. We wanted to point out a couple key challenges that we would notice along the way, and maybe some solutions that can get ahead. So obviously time constraints, adapting new processes and changing current ones are, difficult to do with an organization, but that's why we suggest to start small. If you can show early wins and integrate into this existing workflow, it really is a snowball effect that enables your entire organization. You can have to break down those organizational silos and our typical engineering reluctance to document. But again, this is for knowledge sharing as part of our job responsibilities. We need to also celebrate our contributions. Us as experts in our field, level 2, level 3 analysts, create the documentation. If you're level 2 analyst and you're creating enough documentation, that will get you a path to level 3 and promotion. It also helps you keep content current and relevant. This is like the biggest, I guess, risk here is you have to keep the knowledge up to date for risk reasons. And then balancing standardization with flexibility. We've created what we think is a good balance of standards versus flexibility and enhancements with tagging and enough open-ended fields. You can kind of use it as you want, but obviously take this framework and run with it, adapt it to your needs. But please, we do suggest that you do address the issue internally of disconnected knowledge. You'll measure success improvements across things like coverage, knowing that you have alerts that cover the risk to your organization. You'll see improvements in the quality of detection effectiveness, response effectiveness, and reduction in false positive rates. You also reduce the amount of knowledge gaps and be able to skill up internal resources faster and better. Cost of acquisition for talent right now is certainly an issue across the industry. So if you're able to curate that internally, it's beneficial for everybody, including our employees. Reduce MTTR, MTTX for our incidents as we're able to introduce more automation and enable a quicker time to react and time to triage for our analysts through more prescriptive and identifiable steps. And obviously less time spent on incident management since most things are now being documented and acted upon in a very structured, programmatic way. Again, this whole entire thing behind SNARF is really turning what has historically been documentation that's been thrown at walls into something you can actually use. I mean, if you got to make it anyways, you might as well make it something you can have effective. So some key takeaways for today. Connect the dots. Try to identify and how you can map between your threats, detection, response, and testing. How, as an organization, do you identify that something is a risk or important to you if it is a risk? Make sure you're structuring your knowledge, whether that's in something like a Confluence wiki database. Please try to do it version controlled so that you're able to keep up at speed. Like use that to your advantage. Don't lock people down from making updates to documentation. Have your analysts have the enablement to actually go and make updates to SOPs in the field. Track that obviously with this knowledge management, but that's the best way to keep pace with cybersecurity and the threats and the responses that are coming at us. You need to make knowledge part of your workflow, not necessarily separate documentation so that it stays current. Again, if you're referencing these things and you're able to update them live, then it's staying current live. Start small with complete chains and prove this concept before you can scale out. You have to work out some kinks internally, but that's really just how red tape goes. And also measure improvement. This is not only to ensure that you're on the right track to the improvement that you want, but is able to demonstrate real tangible benefits to potential like security or executive leadership. So organizations that master security knowledge management will have a significant advantage over those that don't. They'll respond faster, they'll adapt more quickly to new threats and operate more efficiently. And they're transforming security documentation from just a compliance checkbook into a strategic asset. So with that, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed our presentation. You can feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn or via the website. We do have a QR code here. We're sharing the templates for the entire framework, effectively open source on GitHub. So feel free to peruse those. Again, slice and dice, edit to your heart's content. Reach out to us with things that you may find beneficial that maybe we have overlooked. 100% open to any and all feedback. Please use the Q&A if you have any other questions. We're happy to spend a couple seconds here with a little feedback. Other than that, thank you so much for Airlock Digital for joining us and for everybody else for joining FCON today. Devlin, if you have any last words, sir?
Yeah, if you are interested in detection engineering, I'm doing a talk on Thursday that kind of extends some of this, or rather some practical experimental things. So ways to leverage that. Again, thanks for your guys' time.
Awesome. And between this talk and the next talk is our vendor expo. So please pop by and spend a couple minutes with them. They're the ones that really make this event happen. And again, thanks everybody for coming and have a great FCON. See you later.